This is probably the least attractive corner of my entire yard, and so I'm going to turn it into this. The list of parts I used for this project is pretty simple. 2 fence posts. These are 4x4s, 8 feet long. 3 2x4s, also 8 feet long. A bunch of fence pickets. Mine are made out of cedar, and I ended up using 14 of them. Some fast-setting concrete. You'll want at least 2 50-pound bags per post. Some nails. You can use a hammer. I used a nail gun. And some deck screws. Links are in the description. You put it all together, and you get a fence. Just like all my other projects. Step 1, dig a hole. For a 4x4 post, you want this to be about 1 foot in diameter and at least 2 feet deep. I just used a regular shovel for this. I figured out where I wanted my posts to be ahead of time by staking these orange markers into the ground. But that's the extent of the planning that I did for this project. It's really not complicated. A little more than 2 feet. It's got to be enough because I've hit clay. It's getting really difficult. I don't think I'm going any further. Man, I've used this blue mixing pan for so many different projects. I used it a couple weeks ago to create the cobblestone mist garden in the corner of my yard. I parged and plastered a whole corner of my interior basement walls. Used this pan for that too. Oh yeah, and I used the same pan when I was repairing all the bricks in my porch. It's just the perfect size for like any sort of 50 to 80 pound bag of mortar or concrete. This is already pretty hard. I'm trying to wiggle this and it's really not moving much. So this is already mostly set up. About 20 minutes later, just finished this one. So I'll let these dry for 40 minutes. It's stiff at that point, and then I'll attach my fence rails. Trusty laser level. Now I don't have to worry, is one of these posts, 7/16 of an inch higher than the other. I can just see exactly the same spot on both posts and measure off of that. Later on, whatever's left over at the top, I'll either lop it off, or if it's within some margin of error that nobody will notice, I'll just leave it as is. I'm just going to mark these lines so that I know where they are, and I can reference them later to put the fence rails on and so forth. I drove 3 screws in a triangle pattern on each side and each post. Seems to be plenty. Let's see how we did with the first rail. Okay, I'll take it. It's like I always say, who needs friends when you have an extra piece of PVC pipe? So now to put the other 2 rails, fence rails on, because I know the top rail is flat and level, I can just measure a fixed distance down from that rail on each post. Okay, now when installing the fence pickets, you want the top of the picket to be about 6 inches above the top fence rail. Now, if you watch other people build fences like this, you'll see them set up like a string line, and they'll have to screw screws in the top and get the string line perfectly level and all this crap. You already have a level thing at the very top. That's the fence rail you just installed. So all you have to do is set a 2x6 on top of the top fence rail, and you have your 6 inches. So that's what I do here. Test all the pickets against that top of the 2x6 to make sure everything's flat. And as you'll see, everything turns out perfectly. Also, each of these pickets is about a 1/2 inch thick, so I just use the picket at a 90-degree angle to ensure even spacing between the pickets. One other thing I like about this setup is this 2x6. I screwed onto the back of the fence, out of view, and I did this so that I can do this. Much more organized, much cleaner way to store a bunch of the tools and other garden implements that I have just laying here next to my shed. These hooks are pretty cool. I just got a pile of them from Home Depot, and they just hook onto the back of any 2x board, just like that. I think there's just one more thing I need to do. That ain't going anywhere.